Do you ever worry about being polite when you're speaking English? Do you worry about making a good first impression? Well, you're in the right place. Today, I'm going to give you some tips for sounding polite when you're speaking English. These tips will help you navigate any professional or social setting with confidence and ease. But before we explore some of the English language that you can use to sound polite, it's important to point out that your demeanour plays an important role too. It's not just about your words. You might be wondering, what's demeanour? Well, your demeanour is your outward behaviour. So your tone of voice, your facial expression, your body language, and how you present yourself outwardly to other people. It can significantly impact the way that your words are perceived. Okay, with that out of the way, should we dive in and explore some of the English language that we can use to sound more polite? Tip number 1 is to use polite expressions. English has many phrases that show consideration and respect for other people. Please, thank you, excuse me, would you mind? Observe how people you respect are communicating in English, and then try doing the same in your conversations. So imagine you're at a dinner party and you say to somebody sitting across from you on the table, "Pass me the salt." This sentence comes across as quite direct and blunt, and frankly a little bit rude. In contrast, "Would you mind passing me the salt, please?" sounds a lot more polite. The words please and could you turn a demand into a polite request. Then, of course, it's essential to slip in a quick thank you. Another example, you're at work and you need some assistance. You could say, "I need your help." But it's much more polite to say, "Excuse me, could you help me with this, please?" Tip 2 is to use softeners in your English conversations. Softeners are words or phrases that make a statement or question sound less direct or harsh. They soften the sound or the tone of what you're saying so that you sound more gentle and not quite so strong or demanding. Softeners are incredibly useful when it comes to making your communication sound respectful. Let's look at some examples of softeners and how you can use them. I was wondering if you could. Would it be possible to? Do you think you could? I would appreciate it if. I was wondering if you could review this document for me, please. Would it be possible to extend the deadline by a few days, please? Do you think you could help me organise the event? I'd really appreciate it if you could send me the details. Now, obviously, these are workplace examples, but I use softeners with pretty much everybody, even my kids. When you use softeners, you tend to get a much better response. I could say to my daughter, "Clear up the kitchen," but I get a much better response if I say to her, "Would you mind clearing up the kitchen for me, please, Tilly?" It sounds more gentle, doesn't it? By the way, I'm Jo, and if we haven't met before, I work with people who want to improve their confidence speaking English as a second-plus language. If you'd like to find out a little bit more about my one-to-one English conversation classes, then head over to my website where you'll find lots of information, plus more daily English lessons where I cover subjects like phrasal verbs, idiomatic language, and lots more. Tip 3 is don't be too direct. Being too direct can come across as being rude, and sometimes it's better to use more indirect language. So, an example, maybe you're working on a team project and you notice that a colleague has made a mistake. If you say to the colleague, "Oh, you've got that wrong," or "You've made a mistake there," it can come across as slightly blunt. It's more polite to say something like, "Oh, I think there's something not quite right here. Could we have a look at it together, perhaps?" This way, the interaction becomes less confrontational and more collaborative. Another example of being indirect in a social situation, somebody might ask you out for a drink at the weekend and you really don't want to go. If you were to say, I don't want to go, it would come across as being rude. It's much better to say something like, I don't think I can make it this weekend, perhaps another time. Some more examples of indirect language in English are, number 1, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's the best approach. What do you think? Number 2, it might be better if. It might be better if we reschedule the meeting until next week. Do you agree? Number 3, have you considered? Have you considered adding more data to support your argument? Number 4, perhaps we could. Perhaps we could go for a drink next weekend instead. A quick reminder that if you go to my website, you can download a free PDF where I go over all the language that I've used in today's lesson. I'll put the link below. Tip 4 is to use modal verbs to soften your requests. We looked at this already a little bit in tip 2 when we were looking at using softeners. Modal verbs like could, would, should and might are really useful for both softening and making your request sound more polite and less direct. Could you send me the report by the end of the day, please? Would you mind closing the door? Should we look into other options for this project? You might want to take a look at this article. This usage of modal verbs is really good for sounding less forceful and more considerate. Finally, tip 5 is, if in doubt, apologise. You might have noticed that British people apologise a lot, even when it's not necessary. I'm sorry, but I can't come to the meeting today. Could I come next week instead? I'm sorry for any confusion. I'm afraid I haven't received the paperwork, sorry. It's really not necessary for us to apologise quite so much, but we do it, and it makes us sound polite. Okay, so let's quickly recap today's 5 tips for sounding more polite in English. Number 1 was use polite expressions. Please, thank you, and so on. Number 2, use softeners in your conversations. Number 3 was try not to be too direct. Number 4 was using modal verbs in polite requests. And number 5 was to apologise, even when it's not necessary. I hope you found today's English lesson useful. If you did, make sure you like and subscribe for more English lessons every Sunday. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.